Okay.
Wow.
Now, if honestly, if it wanted to kill us, the more after talking to Ron and talking to other people, it probably
Right.
could have easily killed us. It
Yeah.
did. I just think it wanted to scare us, get us gone, and get us out of there. But I did notice one thing. Okay. Besides it being big, it ran on two legs, and then every so often. Now, I only turned around maybe 2-3 times the 2 mile run back, because that's how scared I was. But I
Right.
did notice it dropped down to fours
Right.
and then back up. I noticed that at least once or twice during that run. And all I can say is when we got back to the car, now, I always thought it was the same one, but it was pointed out to me by other people recently. It could have been another one, its mate or whatever, by the car, because we were on a side road off the main road going up through the Canadian Rockies, whatever the pass was.
Right.
It was there, maybe 25, 30 feet away from the car,
Wow.
bending a tree over.
Wow.
Probably a fir or pine. I don't know nothing about trees, but it was bending it over like nothing, and it yelled the loudest scream again. And all I know is I was getting in the car. I had the ignition going. My friend didn't
Right.
even get both legs in the car. I was dragging him as I stepped on the gas, and I had to stop where he could get in. That's how scared we were. But again, I think back about it, that 2 mile roughly run from the internment camp to where the car was parked going through the woods.
Right.
It could have easily caught us, or one of us anyway. It didn't.
No, it didn't. And you have to wonder, why it didn't. And you brought up a good point, the fact that it could have and it didn't. And, these stories about extreme intimidation tactics, I'll bring up Jeff Boiler. He's a lawyer up the McKinsey. Before that, he was a deputy sheriff, and he was working out at a ranger station out near Sisters, Oregon, and he was going on vacation for a couple weeks, headed south to California from Sisters, which is a pretty good drive, and decided that he would go pay tribute out where his old buddy's ashes were buried out in the woods. And it was a crazy old road. He was going to do a solo hike, and he had experience enough to where he could do one. Was wandering out in the woods, brought his sidearm with him, and was just going to do an all-day hike and go back to his car. And thought he saw an elk on the hill. Turned out it wasn't an elk. It was a man standing there with red hair looking at him, and it looked like an archaic caveman. Jeff, went slack-jawed. This thing went slack-jawed. And then Jeff, kind of tilted his head. I believe he said just to quote the whole thing, he said, "I tilted my head kind of like the RCA dog off that old commercial when he's listening to it's not live, it's a Memoret commercial."
Oh, yeah.
And this thing, it mimicked him. It turned its head at the same angle with its mouth open. And then Jeff thought about grabbing his gun as soon as it did that. And he said, "Toby, it wasn't at the fact that I grabbed my gun when this thing took off. It was at the point of me thinking about grabbing my gun that my thought pattern had changed, that it bolted out of the woods." And he goes, "I'll tell you something else. I told everybody the story, once or twice, that I know. And I say this thing mimicked me from the hillside," but he goes, "You're kind of catching on." He goes, "This thing was making fun of me. It was mocking me for the fact that it was there the whole time. Like, duh, yeah, I've been here." And, that adding those kind of attributes to this thing point out to this thing being like us, with the same kind of sense of humor as us. I mean, tremendous, abilities to scare you, but at the same time, very tongue-in-cheek and very human-like. And his story goes on and on. You can catch, I think, the episode from Paranormal Witness called Watcher in the Woods. I think it's season 1 or season 2, the Jeff Boiler encounter, which is like a 15-minute episode, and pretty incredible stuff. Very similar to what you described as far as chasing you out in the woods. But what do you do with a report like that where a guy says this thing was mocking me and it was at the thought of me grabbing something? So you have two things going on there. You have very human-like ability, but you also have very unhuman-like ability where this thing is reading your intentions the whole time. So that's
Well,
where I'm at.
yeah. Well, from
Yeah.
the standpoint of mocking you, and you know, and making fun of you, and where you decide, or not you, but the person picking up, you know, and aiming the gun, maybe,
Right.
then it probably at that point was taking it as a threat, and that's where maybe the things can get, you know, dangerous. That, you know, if they feel that you're a threat to them. Maybe if they realize that you're not trying to be a threat to them, that's when they,
Right.
you know, they'll kind of let you go by, and not maybe just try to scare you a little bit. But what gets me is, you know, these people I've talked to. There's one person on Facebook, I'm not going to mention who. They go out on trails looking for Bigfoot and making videos and stuff like this. There's one guy, I swear to God, honestly, Toby, maybe goes a mile out on a trail that probably gets a couple hundred people a day walking it. I just, myself, you know, again, to run across a Bigfoot, again, you know, I wasn't looking for a Bigfoot. I was more concerned about bears,
Right.
you know, where I was at. Because, I mean, the bears over in where I was at in the Canadian Rockies, they would eat you if they got you. So, I mean, I was more concerned about that. But, you know, I think the people, if you're out there really looking hard for them, it's like this one TV show. You know, I was talking to one of the guys that was on the show, Finding Bigfoot or whatever. And he told me, honestly, it's almost impossible, even if there was a Bigfoot around, to, you know, do anything, because you got a crew of all these cameramen, soundmen, and then, you know, the other people all making all the noise through the bushes. They're not going to respond to you.
No. I mean, I think a recent comment that I heard about something that Bobo brought up. I can't confirm this, but I believe recently Bobo brought up the fact that he had an opportunity to get a really decent video or photograph of a Sasquatch, and he had Mindspeak come into you know, Bobo's noggin there and said, "If you take my picture, I'll rip you apart." And that's when Bobo didn't take the picture. So I don't know, that may be urban legend. Someone, you know, chime in if that story's fake. But I've heard these stories so many times from all of these guys, you know, these people that publicly say this is a relic hominid, but privately say, "No, man, this isn't no relic hominid. We know it's you know, crazier than that stuff." I mean, on all these little groups, you know, anybody that's doing paid expeditions right now, they want to take you out and show you a FLIR image or get wood knock from some, you know, archaic relic hominid, but privately, you cannot do this for 10 years. I'll do better than that. You cannot be a Bigfooter for more than a year if you go out more than twice a month and walk away thinking that this issue is not connected to the paranormal. You're just not leveling with people. You're not being fair to yourself and the group that you're taking out with them. And perhaps you're responsible for, you know, moments where these people have PTSD because you haven't leveled with them about the spirit world and about the paranormal. So there's a bit of culpability, in my opinion, and that may be too far of a reach for a lot of people, but I believe it to be true that you know, PTSD can come from having a traumatic supernatural encounter if you're not ready for it. And I've worked with people that have suffered from an event like this. We had an event on top of one of the mountains in Cottage Grove Hill where there were, I think we started off with 6 people that evening, and by the end of the night there was only 2 of us that could last, me and another gal. We're talking about full-grown men that were completely scared over nothing. And
what, like, can you give an example? What scared those grown guys? I mean,
well, whatever this
guys.
is, right? These invisible juju powers, you know, these invisible walls that cause people not to go any farther. Ron Moorhead spoke about this before, where you cannot walk any further.
No, he was saying that the other night. He said that him and another person were walking, and all of a sudden, you know, his friend stopped, and then he stopped, and he couldn't go any farther. Now, I don't know if that was paranormal,
No.
where they were psychologically affecting your brain, telling you you can't go any farther, and your brain is, obeying it, or if it's something else that's stopping you. But if people say that the paranormal is bullcrap, pardon my language, there's so many different things, and I find I've had not just that. I managed a camera store in Tacoma that was built around the 1880s, the building, 1890s. Originally was a hotel. It was like 13, 14 stories, which in the 60s they made it down to like about a 4-story. But originally the basement had a bar. Then the upstairs was the hotel, which was actually a brothel. And, checking into it, because I had people working for me. We'd hire camera salesmen. They come and go, but we had a huge basement that actually went down in the basement all the way out halfway underneath the main street, Pacific Avenue in Tacoma. And these guys would be coming up to me and saying, hey, this is haunted. They would have encounters. Well, I managed that, but I was a general manager. I managed it for years. I heard it quite a bit from all different people. I had like an ex-Navy SEAL. I had ex-Ranger tell me the same thing, that he saw things move by itself downstairs. I had a guy who was a chief bosun mate on, nuclear submarines tell me that he saw things. And, I think even like with the Bigfoot, I think all this stuff connects, because if you can, if you encounter paranormal things, I think you're more open than the people whose brains are shut off. And a Bigfoot or anything could be staring right at their face and they wouldn't even see it's there.
Yeah, the idea that these place names, Henry Franzoni brought up these, old place names, not only given by Native Americans, but by settlers and pioneers throughout North America. They have some interesting names behind them that aren't just Bigfoot names, but yet these are names where you go to have, a paranormal or Bigfoot encounter. And so when you have names like, Spirit Lake or Ghost Mountain or Devil's Ridge or, these interesting other names, not just, Skooka Meadow. How'd they get these names? Did they just hear crazy cries in the woods? Did they just hear wood knocking? I don't think so, because that's not all that happens. This is like I said, a very multi-layered issue. This idea of infrasound, that's a good first step. Calling Sasquatch hyper aware, that's a very good first step. But it's just so much deeper than that. Well-known people in the field have been affected by this, and if they've talked publicly about it, I'll talk publicly about it. But I'm not going to out somebody at all ever that isn't talking publicly about this, because it's not my issue, first of all, to discuss. It's frustrating. It's really frustrating. But I think this is a beautiful subject matter, and you don't want to muddy the water by, outing a witness. But for example, there was a Bigfooter on the East Coast, I believe in Pennsylvania, Billy Willard, who was one of the first podcasters I listened to back in 2009 or so on Blog Talk. And, Billy Willard was trying to wrap his mind around how this, 280 pound tall or 280 pound, 6 foot tall guy was out Bigfooting one day and all of a sudden had to go in the fetal position and was weeping, and down there, sick over what? What was this unseen force that was pushing him back? Now, maybe it's something, you could guess why this happens. No one's ever seen a Sasquatch mentally, push somebody back and, seeing these things happen, at least. Well, I take that back. I do know somebody that actually can see Sasquatch, or that can see they claim that they can actually see the energy waves coming out of the woods, messing or pushing them back with, let's just call it infrasound, or the flute player mentality. So there is one person I know that claims that they can see this aura or this energy force coming out of the woods hitting people, but Getting back to what happened to us up in the woods, we started off with 6, we ended up with 2, and one by one, these men were compelled either by great sickness, fear, and dread. One of the